The wait is finally over. We are back racing down under in Melbourne in one of the highest anticipated starts of a season that the sport has ever seen. But with so many things going on in the off-season, what are the primary things that we need to keep our eyes on ahead of the season starter in Melbourne? And are there any surprises that may catch us off guard? There is no question about it, Lewis Hamilton's debut with Ferrari is the most talked about story ever since he announced the bombshell move 1 year ago. Many believed he would retire with Mercedes, but the Brit has proven to the F1 world that he's here to win and to compete for a greater cause, the 8th championship, which he felt was not possible with Mercedes. The pre-season testing has shown some flaws with Ferrari's performance, especially with the tyre degradation, but with Bahrain and Melbourne being two very different venues, the hopes of the Tifosi have increased highly ahead of the season starter. Lewis Hamilton himself felt very positive with the SF25, and the car has kind of suited his driving style to a really great extent, which is exactly the news that Vasseur and the engineers back in Maranello would love to hear. Leclerc has voiced his concerns, however, regarding dubbing the SF25 as the championship favourite car, but on the other hand, Hamilton's statements were very optimistic. The team principal of Ferrari himself said that there are lots of variables ahead of the Melbourne GP, and when talking about the chances of Ferrari snatching a race win and potentially starting the season with a 1-2, the Frenchman said, "Whether we win or not in Melbourne, it won't be the end of the championship. The first race result won't count for much. Albert Park is a unique track, but even in the following races, it will be hard to assess the true competitiveness of the cars. It will be hot in Australia, cold in China and Japan. We'll return to Bahrain, this time with much higher temperatures during testing. It's going to be an exciting season." Whether or not the weather in Melbourne will suit Hamilton's debut and make it unforgettable, time will tell, but it looks like the situation is going to be tense from the first lap as he will try to make a statement over Leclerc. The Saturday's session shouldn't be affected by the rain, but that's not the case for Sunday. A big drop in the temperatures is expected for Sunday's race, where the weather forecast predicts rain possibility up to 90%. Hamilton could pull a masterclass here and start the season in a perfect manner thanks to the rain, but that is definitely not enough to lay all of the hopes for a race win based on just the weather itself. It is going to be hard because he's the one adapting to the newest machinery of Ferrari, despite the SF25 being a 99% different car to last year. But apart from Hamilton's debut, there are a lot of other stories that need to be unfolded down in Melbourne, such as the big question in McLaren. Even before the pre-season testing began, McLaren was always dubbed the team to beat, with Bahrain showing that they have a massive advantage in their hands. Of course, there is always something hidden from the teams because they are not showing their true potential during these sessions, but the advantage that McLaren has shown put them as the leaders, with one question remaining to be answered: who is going to be the number one driver in their team? Last year, we've seen that Piastri has shown his teeth more often than not, and the Monza fight between him and Lando has given us a clear picture that when the time for a championship fight comes, he won't yield down. At that time, it was Lando, the driver, who was dubbed to be the championship protagonist from McLaren, but now there is a clean slate ahead of them. Piastri's behaviour will change massively. The Aussie has opened up about a potential championship season from his side, further stating, "It's definitely a clean slate this year. Everyone is starting on zero again, and I think last season towards the end it was natural that I still had the opportunities to go out and put my best foot forwards. Yes, there were a couple of situations where I ended up helping Lando, but there were some ways he still helped me out, so it wasn't as clear cut as that. But definitely we are starting on a clean slate, and I do think that I can become world champion this year." This will be vastly disputed by Norris, who will look to secure his first championship before the new regulations kick in, as he left us with a lot to prove ahead. Norris is naturally the more experienced driver in McLaren, which could mean nothing if Piastri unlocks a huge chunk of performance from himself, but the dynamics in the Woking-based squad will definitely shift because they don't have the luxury of being alone at the top. With two Ferraris being very proximate, as well as a raging bull in Verstappen, McLaren will always be kept on their toes, so the last thing they would need is a 2016 Mercedes-like situation unfolding right from Melbourne. And it's not a secret that Verstappen's stance ahead of the Melbourne GP has been quite negative because of the pre-season testing that his team has gone through. The data was not precisely related to the simulator tests, and this led the Dutchman to believe that he won't be in completion for the win, at least not in the first race this season. When talking about it to a greater extent, Verstappen said, "I don't think we can fight for the win already in Melbourne. At the moment there is only one team that could win, and that team is orange." That is a very nice colour, of course, but from our side we still have a lot of work to do. Other teams want to see some improvements as well, I think. So at the moment one team is clearly in front. If you look at the lap times, then I think McLaren is the favourite. On our side everything went completely smoothly, but on the other hand we have some ideas on how to improve. Helmut Marko has raised his concerns as well, with the veteran Austrian stating that there is a lot of performance that McLaren is yet to show in front of the F1 world. While it's obvious that everyone is sandbagging and hiding performance in pre-season testing, there is no doubt that McLaren might have saved a bit more than usual because they were very cautious with their car. Be that as it may, the cards are not looking very good for Red Bull, who are starting the season on their back foot for the first time in quite a while. And on top of that, they have a semi-rookie in Lawson who had a couple of stints in 2023 and 2024 to prove that he is worthy of an F1 seat. This will have huge implications on how the future will unfold for Verstappen as well, because the Dutchman has been adamant that he won't remain in a team that can't build race-winning cars. And at the moment finally came. We have technically 3 rookies on the grid because Doohan, Behrman and Lawson already have F1 experience, but nevertheless the entire F1 media is picturing 2025 as a season in which we will have 6 rookies on the grid. This should create havoc in many of the races, and considering the fact that we are expecting rain on Sunday in Melbourne, then it's safe to assume that the real faces of these drivers will come out. Having 1 or 2 races under your belt is not enough to be considered an experienced F1 driver, and there is no doubt that the pressure will get to these drivers. The question is how much of an effort they can put in order to keep their heads above water. In the cruel and never forgiving world of Formula One, one small mistake might mean a lot because it can start a spiral of poor performance. Considering the fact that there are tons of experienced drivers who are waiting for these rookies to make a mistake, we should be expecting a very anticipated fight for the drivers' lives, and with this in mind, the season opener in Australia might already give us tons of answers as to where the rookies stand in terms of their future in the sport. And while the top teams will be in the spotlight more often than not, it doesn't mean that the fight for the midfield should be diminished by all means. This is something that could cause a team to gain tens of millions of dollars in cash prize, and by the same merit, lose it if they don't show as much performance as expected. The team that would be expected to be at the front of the midfield is Williams because of the arguably strongest lineup they have among these teams, but whether or not they'll live up to expectations, time will tell. In 2024, the team wasted huge resources on repairing the car rather than working on upgrades. So with all of the technical limitations they have right now, it's inevitable that they will rely a lot on the drivers' feedback and their experience rather than the car's performance in general. But with Haas and Racing Bulls also being present in the mix, there is quite a lot to fight for, as every point will matter. With all this in mind, what do you think of the expectations ahead of the Australian GP, and more importantly, who do you have as the favourite to win it all? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're interested in Hamilton's adaptation compared to Leclerc, make sure to check out the video that's appearing on your screen right now.